Hi folks, hopefully I get this all in one video. I try and keep them 5 minutes or less, but this is about heart rate monitor, not monitor, but heart rate training. And there's a lot to talk about when it comes to heart rate training. So if necessary, we'll split this into two. So heart rate training allows you to train by effort versus pace. So really the only reason that I give you any type of a pace is to try and get you to a particular effort, because that effort is going to cause a physiological change, which helps your body improve, which helps you race better, etc. Essentially what that would look like is, rather than saying, hey, I want you to run from 10:15 to 10, it might say, I want your heart rate to be from 145 to 150, maybe a little bit larger range. Now, the nice thing about this is it automatically adjusts for effort. So you always hear me say, if it's hot and humid, etc., you should slow down your pace. There are other things that will affect your pace as well. The wind will affect your pace. Going uphill will affect your pace. You might be tired on a given day. So heart rate tends to be a little bit more objective than you are. And you might find that you're in that 145 to 150 range, but maybe you're running 11. Or maybe you're running 9:45, just depends upon the day. So heart rate training allows you to train by the right effort and not have to worry about the pace. So why don't more people do that? Well, there's a few things that you have to consider. So first of all, what's your maximum heart rate or your heart rate zones? Most people don't know what those are. And if you don't know your actual zones or your actual max heart rate, you really don't know where you should be training. It's also a lagging indicator. Heart rate is not instantaneous. It lags a little bit. And then there's something called cardiac drift that you have to consider as well. So let's keep going. Let's get to the max heart rate. Now there's all kinds of formulas out there. I'm going to show you an example of the simplest formula, but I'm here to tell you I've checked it with other formulas and they're kind of close. But the simple formula is you take 220 minus your age. I am 59. Well, I'm 59 next month. That means my max heart rate should be 161. But my actual max heart rate is 192. So this is not even close. And every time I've looked at any different calculator, it's the same way. And then people say, well, 192, you must be in really good shape. Actually, your max heart rate is largely genetic. It does tend to decline as you age, but the better shape you're in, the more that your heart rate is going to stay the same. So I was first tested 2002 or so. It was 194. I'm down to 192 14 years later. I'm in good shape, so I've seen little degradation. But that 192 is not because I'm in good shape. That's a genetic thing. In fact, that first time I was tested, here's some examples. There was one woman, her max heart rate was 212. Couldn't believe it. Mine was 194. There's another guy that was 165, because genetically we're all very different. And here's why that's important. If somebody were to say, hey, go do this workout and I want your heart rate to be right around 150. Well, for me, that'd probably be a fairly decent workout, maybe like a tempo type of a pace. For this guy with 165, he'd be dying. That's getting close to his race pace. And for the person at 212, they're hardly breaking a sweat because that heart rate's way too low for them. Again, doesn't mean that any of these people are any more fit than anybody else. It's their starting point. So you really need to know what your max heart rate is or what your zones are. So the question is, well, if the formulas don't work, what the heck do I do about that? Well, there's a couple of ways. One, you can get a treadmill test done. You can go in and pay anywhere between 100 and 150 bucks, and they put you on a treadmill. They strap this mask on you that makes you look like you're a character out of Star Wars, and they hook tubes up and they just crank you up. And they'll generally be able to tell you what your zones are and a pretty good estimation of your max heart rate. In fact, every max heart rate I have been has been an estimation, but all the estimations have come out to be the same. I've never actually been up to 194. There's also a self-test you can do. It's on the track. If anybody's interested in that, I can give you the steps. But there's a series of runs that you can go through on a track that will allow you, without shelling out the money, to kind of get an approximation for where your max heart rate is at. Now, I made the comment, so that's max heart rate. You've got to know that it's also a lagging indicator. It's not instantaneous. So here's an example of some track work that I was doing recently, if you can see this very well. So the first one, if you're looking over here, I was doing a 3K. And I was doing it at a pace where I would expect my heart rate to be right around in the low 160s for the pace that I was doing. But it's probably difficult to see. Well, maybe you can see the 160. You can see at the very, very end of this, I was finally up to 160 and a little bit over. So if I was looking at my heart rate during almost the entire time, I'd be going, oh, I'm too slow. The effort is wrong. I was on a track. I know my effort exactly where it needs to be. It took a bit of time for my heart rate to catch up with my effort. Right after that, you can see I was doing some 800 meters, so those are even shorter. I would expect the pace I was doing, my heart rate would be close to 170. never got close to that. They were over too fast. And then finally you see some 200 meters. The reason you see the heart rate gradually climbing with that, I was doing moving rest, so there wasn't as much recovery. Same thing. For the pace I was doing with the 200 meters, I'd want a heart rate well into 170s. I barely hit 160 because they were so short. So when you're running, it's a lagging indicator, and you have to take that into consideration. I also mentioned cardiac drift. So cardiac drift is a situation where after you've been out for a while, and for me it's usually anything over about an hour, but there's this phenomenon where your heart rate will slowly tick up 1 or 2 beats very, very gradually, but your effort actually hasn't increased. So you kind of need to ignore that because it's not true because of that little bit of drift that you have in there. So you got to know your max heart rates or your zones. You have to consider that it's a lagging indicator, and you have to be aware of cardiac drift. So the final thing would be, well, if I don't know my max heart rate, I don't want to go do this test, I don't want any of that, but I still want to use my heart rate monitor, what can I do? You can use it as a frame of reference. So you kind of look and you're watching your heart rate either during your run or after you're running. You might find out that, hey, anytime I'm running at about a 10 pace, my heart rate is usually 145 to 150. I'm totally making that up. If one day you're supposed to be running about a 10 and you see your heart rate is higher than that, it's an indication, hey, maybe something's going on. Boy, maybe it is a little bit hotter today. Maybe I'll slow it down. Maybe you're just tired that day. And that's usually what I do. I do not train by heart rate personally. I very rarely pay much attention to it during the run. I watch it during a race. I generally look at it after a run. To me, I use it more as a gauge on my dashboard of all the things that I consider, but I won't be ruled by it. And I think ruled has a negative term, but there are people who very successfully train totally using heart rate. So hopefully that was quick enough. I'm seeing 6 minutes. I guess I don't want to cut it back, but questions, comments, let me know.